If you need to fundraise immediately, then you haven't really proven the business. And if you haven't proven the business, then you haven't developed the conviction around the idea.
Welcome back to the My First Business podcast. This is a mini episode where I take some of the best parts of my interviews with phenomenal entrepreneurs and chop it up for you like a snack. What advice do you see commonly given to new entrepreneurs that you think is not right? Something that is in our culture it's permeating pretty well, but you look at advice for new entrepreneurs, you're like, no, that one, I wish you don't listen to as a new entrepreneur. Is there anything that comes to mind?
I think right now, it would probably have to do with funding. I think a lot of entrepreneurs now are looking at a way to get funded. They're spending more time trying to find ways to raise capital or thinking about raising capital than rather proving that the idea, the concept, the business works. Optimizing for short wins and bootstrapping your way to a point to the point where you know it works. You've mitigated the risk and now it's about scale. So one advice would be ignore advice around fundraising. If you need to fundraise immediately, then you haven't really proven the business. And if you haven't proven the business, then you haven't developed the conviction around the idea. It's all concept, it's all abstract, it's all in the air.
Yeah.
So I think bootstrapping it to the point where it's proven is the advice or the opposite of that is what I would ignore.
Yeah. Would it be fair to also say that if you are so hell-bent on raising funding before building, that when you do successfully raise funding, because, right now is one of those times where you throw a business plan in the air and someone has capital to deploy into you, whether it's belief cap or something else, that you don't stay true to yourself and true to your own conviction and true to your own intuition when building something. Because I'm speaking from experience. That's one of the thoughts I had when raising or wanting to raise funding for, let's say, this podcast. Okay, I need to get someone to come in and pay for my studio costs for the whole year and then XYZ. But then I thought of the trap that would be too, because now what if I change my mind? What if I want to do things differently? Now, do I need buy-in from other people? Because when you're in that 0 to 1 phase, you're very fickle, I feel, as an entrepreneur. Like, you can have your vision, but your strength is in being able to change directions. But if you sold a bill of goods to an investor, then that probably gets harder and you start doing a lot of compromises to yourself. And instead of building a business, you've potentially built a trap for yourself.
Yeah, look, bringing in funding is bringing in liability, right? You're now liable to someone else. And when you're liable to someone else, now you have to compromise.
Yeah.
And that's okay if you're at that stage where you can start compromising because you're no longer really proving the business. But when you're in the stage where you're proving the business and you're trying to get early wins, you have to move so fast. With Zenbox, we had to move so quickly that I've been thinking about this. What if we got early stage funding? Would we have been able to scale our way through the pandemic? Maybe. I don't know the answer to that question.
Or you could have made a bigger problem for yourself by holding on to a lot of lockers without any customers.
Or I could have made a bigger problem for myself, absolutely. Yeah. So we had to prove the model before we started thinking about that. So yeah, it is a trap. It can be a trap. But at the same time, it can also lead to freedom. So I think it's finding the right balance. Timing is key. But I think until you've bootstrapped it to the point wherein you've gotten to the point wherein, okay, you know what? Now I need someone to take me to the next level.
Yeah.
Or I need a partner, a strategic partner that can help me take it to the next level. Up to that point, and it's usually when you think about being at that point, it's further along. It's not usually at that point.
Yeah.
It's usually much further along. That's when it starts coming to play.
So risk-taking.
Yes.
Something that I face as a question almost every day. And by nature, entrepreneurs are daily risk takers almost. Whether it's a new business, existing business. I'll give you a bit more context. I didn't grow up in a very risk-friendly environment. We were raised to climb the corporate ladder, do this. There's a path set out for you. Don't deviate too much from it.
Yeah. Do what works.
Do what works.
It's predictable.
Yeah. You put in one, you get, that's the kind of thing you need to do. And part of that risk taking is you put in one, you get 10, or you put in one, you get 0.
Yeah.
So I've been conditioned for a long time to put in one and get one. And that's the only game we play up until we started our own business. And I've been starting to feel the effects of risk in my gut too. So I'm looking for frameworks. I'm looking for mental models. I'm looking for heuristics on how does someone identify what is a good risk to take?
Yeah.
When you're taking a bet, how do you quantify and qualify for yourself? This is a bet worth taking in business, especially. What have you learned, your last few decades of?
So I'll give you a framework, and I'll give you a heuristic, something that is more on the emotional side. So when I look at risk in most businesses that I've started, I would look at what's the worst case scenario. Always. What's the worst case in this situation? And the reason I look at the worst case, and something that I've only understood recently, the worst case approach has always been the approach, right? It's, okay, what's the maximum I can lose in here? When I was in consulting in the Valley, in the beginning of my career, I was working for, as I mentioned earlier, right, this firm, Susquehanna. And the first few months, we had to play poker every single day because the founder saw parallels between poker and options trade. So I started learning about risk from that perspective. Okay, what is the worst case, right? And am I able to shoulder the worst case? And if so, then let's go. It was that simple. One thing I've found is that when we embrace the worst case, right, now all of a sudden you have envisioned what you fear. And when you are intimate, really intimate with what's causing anxiety in your system, right, you take its power away. It almost dissolves because now you've thought about it, you know what it looks like, you know what it's going to feel like, you can see it, you can hear it, and now it's not as much of, it's not bringing that level of anxiety and fear anymore because you've gone through that process of thinking about it. So the risk in my mind, because to me risk is, yes, there's external risk, there's also the narrative that we create in our own minds, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the risk associated with certain investments that we make and certain businesses that we start. Yeah. It's the story that we're telling ourselves.
All right, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed that teaser. I think you will love the full episode. I'll leave the links in the description below, or you can head on over to my website. It's nparvez.com. Before you head off, I have just one more question to ask you. Why haven't you subscribed yet?